Welcome. In this tutorial, we are going to start from the player mouse look tutorial, right? You need to at least have a character with mouse look scripting on in order to make this functional. And so you can go back, you can do that tutorial in mine. If you've done it somewhere else, I'm sure it's going to be similar enough that there shouldn't be any issues, because we're not going to be modifying any of the graphs that we've already created. We'll be adding a section on the player mouse look graph, but it's not going to be linked to any of the other actions that we've already done. That's the bare minimum of what you'll need. If you happen to have done the enemy AI tutorial, then having your turret up and using that scene is totally fine. So let's get started. So first, right, we're going to be shooting a projectile at something. Now, in this method, we're not actually flinging a physical object across the scene to hit this far object. What we're doing is we're casting a ray. And what you can imagine, that's more like almost like a laser, right? Because the time it takes for the ray to go from our player to our target is instantaneous, more or less. And so this is not going to account for like drift or if the character's moving, right? We're just going to nail that thing no matter if our target's on it and we hit the button, we're going to nail it, right? So we're not going to go through any of those complexities, but there's a lot of other tutorials out there that kind of explain like how to add some randomness or variability to your scene, or have like a wind variable that would push your target over a little bit and modify where, or push the bullet over a certain distance. There's lots of ways you could continue to refine this once we've got the basics down, and we're just focusing on the basics. So one of the things I did in this scene is my player was looking out away from the scene, so I just rotated my Y 180 degrees for my player, so it's pointing at the scene. It just makes my life a little easier when we get started. So right, this is our forward direction along the z-axis as always. And what we're going to do is we're going to use something called a raycast. And what a raycast does is it basically creates an invisible line in whatever direction you tell it to point, right? In our case, we're going to be pointing it in the transform forward direction from our player. And we are going to be trying to, and then if it hits an object, it's going to report back what object it hit. And if it has a tag, or you can probably pull the name out, it's basically going to be giving you, if there's a rigid body attached, it can give you that. It can give you a lot of information, and sometimes it can just give you a true or false, right? Is it hitting an object or is it not hitting an object? And it really depends on what you want to use this raycast for, right? This could be used as you could say like a laser sensor. So if somebody's walking into a room, they trip the sensor, right? It doesn't matter what trips it, or right, if the beam is broken at a certain distance, then it goes, right? So it can tell you distance, it can tell you what you're hitting, it can tell you if it has a rigid body. There's all sorts of things, all sorts of information you can get from this. And we're going to use just some of the basics. So let's get started. So first, right, we want to cast this ray in the forward direction, but we don't want to cast it in the forward direction of the player. We're going to want to cast our ray in the forward direction of the camera, right? Because if you remember in this mouse look script, our camera can point up and down and left and right. And we want to be able to make sure that our targeting system, whatever, right? The crosshair can actually, right, be moving up and down and left and right. And so the first thing we want to do is we don't want to be casting a ray from inside our player or inside our camera, because we will be, right, it could be essentially intersecting or colliding with our player or some part of the player body. So what we need to do is we want to get a little bit closer. So I'm just going to double click on my player. I'm going to rotate my view a touch. And we need to create a child object that's going to be the starting point of our raycast, right? If you've done the 2D tutorial on the platform patrol, this will sound a little familiar. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to select my camera object because I want this to be a child of the camera, right? Because I want it to be able to tilt up and down. And so I'm going to go ahead and say create empty child. And I'm going to call this Raycaster. you'll notice that there's this little plus sign here next to the Raycaster, and that's because right, this is a prefab, and we've added something to this prefab. Now, once we're done with this, we can update all the overrides on the prefab. But for now, we're just going to leave it as its own little thing. And let's select our Move tool, and then let's make sure that our Raycaster is zeroed. It is. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull this forward a little bit in front of our object. And I'm actually going to bring it just down a touch as well from the thing, right? You can imagine, right, if you were doing this as like a, if you had your character had a firearm, you would probably want to raycast from the, from the tip of the barrel, right? Would be where you would want that raycaster. In our case, it doesn't really matter as long as it's somewhat close to our object. Okay, so we've created that, and what I want you to do now is make sure that you have your toggle tool handle in local rather than global up here. Because then when we play this, we can watch this change as we move our mouse. Okay, so right, I'm aiming my mouse down, my aim is going down, up, my aim is going up, left and right, my aim is going left and right, right? So you can see that you can imagine there's like, some firearm attached to the end of this, or, whatever it is that you're trying to aim with. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And right, so that's working. So now what we need to do is we need to be able to reference this and generate a ray from this point essentially to infinity, or at least along a direction. We don't care how far this goes. Now, there is a version of Raycast where you can determine a max distance. And so, you could say, well, this item that I have equipped only has a range of a certain number of units. And that would be a way to do that, is to just cap that distance for each one of these different objects. But in our case, it's just going to go off into infinity. Okay, so we've got our Raycaster attached to our camera. So let's go to so we'll need to create a couple object variables. And so I'm going to scroll down, and let's see here. So I'm going to need to grab a couple of things here. So first, I'm going to need to create a variable for my Raycaster, because I'm going to be referencing it in my flow graph, and this is a macro that's on my player mouse look. So I'm going to need to have a reference because I won't be able to grab it. So let's go ahead and just create a new variable called Raycaster. Oops. And this will be a game object. And let's go ahead and just click and drag and pull that in there. And then we are also going to create a camera variable and put our camera in there. And these two things are just going to make our life a lot easier when we go to make our graph. And so I'm going to type in cam, right? Because we want this to be a camera. We're not probably going to use any of these other features, but it's fine. I'm going to grab my main camera and drag it down here. Oops. I'm going to drag it down here one more time and actually drop it in there. Okay, so I've got those things set. So now I'm going to select my player mouse look, and I'm going to go ahead and double click in here. We're going into our player script, and there's some things that we're going to need to add in here. The main thing, and I don't know if it would make sense to put it in here just because I'm lazy. I'm putting it in here. It would probably be better to have this next little bit of code actually in some, like a game manager script, but I don't have one created for this scene, so I'm just going to put it in the player. And what we're going to do is we're going to use something called cursor lock. And what cursor lock does is it basically disappears your cursor and it locks it into the very center of the game screen, right? And this is this is absolutely necessary for this next piece to work, because essentially as you move your camera, then the center of your camera is going to be your crosshair. And we're going to actually create a crosshair using the UI system here in just a little bit. But so we'll basically be placing the center of our crosshair there. And so this is crucial. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click, and we need a start unit because we just want this to happen when the whole thing starts. And we are going to click another unit, and we're just going to type in cursor. And right, there's several options here, but there's this, there's cursor, lock, state, and set. And that's the one we want. We're going to go ahead and connect our flow, and we are going to make this locked. Now, when we're in the editor, hitting the escape key is the default function that will get us out of a cursor locked state. However, if we use cursor lock and we build our projects, there is no default action that will get you out of the cursor lock state. So if you build it and you forget to put in something to get you out of that, then you are going to have you're going to have a problem. So what we need to do is we need to add a unit. We're going to need to have an on keyboard input option here. And instead of the space key, let's go ahead and use the escape key, right? So it's going to be the same key in the editor, like the editor's already doing this. But if we were to then build this and forget to do this, it means like you have to essentially force quit the program to get out of it, or it's a mess. So let's go ahead and have this set. And we're just going to copy our lock state. And we're going to change this from locked to none. And we're going to click. Now, the other lock state that's in here is confined. And confined just means it's going to be confined to the bounds of the window. So if you had, right, if you opened your, right, if you created your game and you had it open here, the cursor would not be able to leave, right, the frame that it's in. And that's not what we want in this case. Okay, so we've got our lock state set. Fantastic. So now what we need to do is we need to create our ray, and we need this ray to go from the position of our raycaster and then in the forward direction from the raycaster. So let's go ahead and go to our object variables, and we're going to come down here and, oh, did I put that on the wrong graph? I don't know. Oh, I must have put it on the camera. I must have had the wrong thing selected. So let's go ahead and make a raycaster again on our object. If you were lucky and made this and didn't have this problem, then great. So let's go ahead and redo this step. I don't know what I did wrong. That's fine. I'm going to make this a game object, and I'm going to put my raycaster in here. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my player. Double click in here, and now I should be able to grab my raycaster. Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to pull this in, and right, so I've got my raycaster, and what I want to get is I want to get the position first. So let's just say transform.position. I want to get that. The other thing I'm going to want to get is the direction. So I just want transform.forward. Right, and this is going to, the transform forward is going to give me my local forward transform, right? And those are the two pieces of information that I'm going to need. And now what I need to do is I need to be able to do this raycast. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to say add unit, and I'm going to go down and I'm just going to type raycast. And there's these raycast hits, which are not what we're looking for. We're looking for the Physics.Raycast objects down here. And so you can see there are tons of different options, right? So each one of these has different rules, and we can talk about some of these. This layer mask basically says, like, you know, you can tell it what layers to ignore, right? So it's not going to, so if it's like, you know, if you don't want to worry about anything in the scene being shot, you know, you can just ignore those things. In our case, we're just going to go with the simplest one right now. However, we don't just want this origin and direction. So the origin direction one is going to give us, we input the origin direction, and then we just get a true or false if it's hit something. And we need a little bit more information. So we're going to say we want the origin, direction, and hit info. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. And so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and connect our position. That will be the origin. And our forward direction is going to be the direction, right? So now when this is all fired up, we're going to have a ray shooting out from our raycaster in the forward direction of the raycaster. So I've got these things set. Now what I need to do is I need to I want to know several things. We're going to create several objects and we're going to give them a couple different tags. And so we're going to use that to kind of show what the Raycaster does before we involve the shooting aspect of this. And so we have this Raycast Hit Info. So if I click on that and pull this down, right, and go to Raycast Hit, there's all sorts of things I can pull out of this Raycast Hit. Notice one of the things I can do is I can get the collider, right? And if I get the collider, then I can, right, grab the game object for that, figure out the tag, right? All of those things. You'll also note that I can also just check the distance from where I'm at to where the object I'm hitting is. There's this light map coordinates. We're not going to worry about that right now. Normal, that's the direction of the polygon that the Raycast is hitting. So it's the normal direction of that, which can be really useful. The point is where on the object, the actual point in 3D space that the hit is happening, right? So, you know, in games where, right, you know, a headshot is like instant death typically, or, right, you get shot in the leg or chest or whatever, right, you can really define where the hit happens. And then you can also use this point to essentially attach objects using Raycast as well. We're not going to get into that now. There's also the transform of the object that you've hit. We're not going to worry about the triangle index, right? But there's texture coordinates as well. There's all sorts of things you can do with this, which is fantastic. So all we're going to get right now is the collider. So I'm going to get the collider. And now once I've done this, there's a point in here, and I can't remember if it's before or after, but there's a point where we're either going to be getting a collider or not getting a collider, and it may just be that this hit info is null, but we're going to be wanting to do a null check, and we'll do it this way, and it's probably wrong, and then we'll do something else. So rather than comparing a tag, I just want to get the tags right now. So I'm going to just say game object dot tag, and I want to get whatever tag is attached to the game object that I've hit. And then let's go ahead and we'll create an object level variable that's just called hit object. And we can go ahead and maybe we'll call it hit object tag. Actually would be better. And we are going to make this a string. And to start with, let's just type in null. I found that if you just leave this blank, it gets a little fussy. So we've got this, and we're going to set this variable. So I'm clicking in here so nothing's selected. Hold down Option, click and drag, and pull this set out. And then let's feed the tag in here. And now we need an update function. So let's go ahead or an update unit. So update, oops. Oh, there we go. Even though I misspelled it really horribly, it still found it. And I think if I just click here, it'll do the whole thing. Now it's giving me some sort of issue here. So let's look at my inspector. Invoke is required but never entered. Okay. So what that means is that I can't just connect over here. I actually have to invoke it here. And then I'm going to need to connect all the way over here, right? So, okay. So at this point, we're just going to be getting our tag and setting our tag here for whatever object we hit. And this is going to be raycasting continuously. So no matter what, we're hitting this object right now. And we're eventually we'll add some input in here that's going to make it so we only like hit it or destroy it when we have a couple things happening at the same time. So let's go ahead and step out of this. And let's go ahead and create a few more objects in our scene. So we have a few things to choose from when we're hitting. And I'm just going to create a cube real quick. And that cube, I'm going to just call it target 1. And then this target needs to be moved a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and just pull it somewhere here between the turret, move it over a little bit. And then I'm going to make it 2 units tall, just so it's a little bit taller. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. Let's just have 4 targets. So I copied and pasted it. So I have target and target 1, 2, and 3. And if I select target 1 now, I can scoot target 1 over here. I can put target 2 a little bit further away, and target 3 I can scoot the other direction. Doesn't really matter. Right, okay, so I've got 4 or 5 objects here in my scene that I can aim at now. And now what we need to do is let's go ahead and tag these. Now I probably have a bunch of tags already created in here, so I'm just going to randomly select these tags that are in this project and not use player, but I'm going to use these other tags, so each one just has a different tag so we know we're hitting these different objects. So I'm going to call one block, I'm going to go up to the next one, and I'm going to go to call that obs. I go to the next one. If you don't have a bunch of tags, just create some tags. Call that one boost. And just, you could name them the target names. I'm going to call this one health. And then I'm going to select my turret, which is untagged as well. And I'm going to call this destroyer, because it potentially could destroy things. I'm also going to select the plane, and I'm going to tag that ground. And so all of my different objects are now tagged. So when I go over those with my mouse, I should be able to target them. So let's go ahead and run this. And hopefully everything's working smoothly and I don't get any errors. Okay, so I've clicked once to get my cursor to lock. And then I'm going to hit escape because I don't want that cursor lock on. I'm actually going to make this window a little bit bigger so we can see. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm going to select my player mouse look, because I want to go to my object variables here, and I want to see what the value this hit object has. I can also come over here and come on down and you can see it here. So let's go ahead and click again and click one more time. Oh, for some reason that lock isn't happening. But you can see now the value is boost. And you'll notice that my tag, and now it's obs, you'll notice that my tag object down here is red. And that's because there are times when it is there are nulls. You'll notice there is a null being sent right now because I'm aiming up at the sky, right? And so that null is giving an error because it's expecting a unit. So let's go ahead and stop this and we'll do our null check there. Because what we'd like to do is have something else happen, and so that, so we're not having all these errors popping up. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, click again. I'm just going to type in null and do my null check. And so I'm going to say, okay, well, if it's not null, this is what I want to do. And I want to actually reconnect this over here. Right, so if it's not null, I want to do that. I'm going to disconnect this and connect this flow in here. If it is null, we can just go ahead and we're going to do these steps again. But I'm going to select these two objects, my tag get and my set variable. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to pull these down here. I'm going to connect this down here. Oh, I'm actually not going to connect that, sorry. And I don't even need this game object. I'm making mistakes left and right. Get rid of that. Let's just do a string literal, and we're just gonna say no target or something like that, right? We're just gonna be feeding this in if this is null. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see what we get now. Okay, so currently I'm aimed at the ground. All right, if I move up, there's no target now. You can see I have no target, but if I move down a little bit, I can hit ground again. If I scroll across, I hit the destroyer for a quick second. But right, without any way of knowing exactly where the center of my viewport is, it makes it really hard to figure out, what exactly I'm targeting. So let's go ahead and do that part of the tutorial, and then we will come back and add the functionality of clicking and destroying things. So I'm going to hit escape to pop my mouse out of there. I'm going to stop this. And let's go ahead and create our UI elements that are going to help us to do this. So now one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink my game window so I have a bit more space here. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my plus sign in my hierarchy. I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to go down to image. And you know, and then I'm going to rotate my view so I can more clearly, right, see this, because it's, right, I still don't quite understand why Unity makes this so awkward, but it does. So I've got this image, and I'm just going to go ahead and we're not applying any sprites to this at all right now. We could create a crosshair sprite if we wanted to, but we're just going to make a sprite out of two images. So I'm going to use my rect tool. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to hover over the edge, I'm going to hold down Option, or actually I'm going to start clicking and dragging first, then hold down Option so that I can do this uniformly around the center, and I'm just going to make this really small this direction, and then I'm going to click here and I'm going to hold down Option and make it pretty small this direction. It's still huge in the scene, and white probably isn't the best color choice. I'm going to change this to black. In my color field over here, and then this is still, you know, a little bit wider than I'd like it and a little bit taller than I'd like it, so I can come into my width and height here and I can just say 2, and let's make the height 10. Nah, that might be a little short. Let's make the height, let's just make it 20. Okay, so I've got this one, so I'm going to go ahead and select this image. I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it. So I have image 1, and on image 1, all I'm going to do is rotate in the Z direction 90 degrees. All right, and now I've got a really basic crosshair. And these are both centered exactly in the center of the screen. And so this should help out a lot, right? A really simple way to make this happen. So if we go ahead and run this, and before I lock in the screen, I make my game window a little bit larger and click, right? So now wherever this crosshair aims, right? Oh, and I actually need to hold on escape and come back and click on my mouse look object so that I can, see these units and click back in here. And I don't know why it doesn't let me go back, but whatever. You can see wherever that crosshair ends, right? Now I'm on the destroyer. Now I have no target. Now I'm hitting the ground, right? Now I'm hitting the boost. This time I'm hitting obs. This time I'm hitting health. And this time I am hitting block, right? So this allows me to aim. So fantastic. So now how do we shoot? So to do the shooting part of this graph, what we need is a button that we want to use to shoot. Now, we could do, you know, on keyboard input, but that's not really what we're interested in doing. What we'd like to do is be able to use the left mouse button to fire, which is like a traditional, you know, desktop gaming thing. But we also would like it so that if we hit the fire button on, say, a console controller or something like that, we get a fire as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click in our graph, and we are going to type in input.get but, and we want get button down, and the button name that we want to use is going to be fire 1, and it's capital F-I-R-E number 1. And so what we want to do is, we only want to destroy an object when both this, we actually have an object that we can hit, which is, this not null, which we're doing. And then also, but it has to also be, this has to be true as well. So what we can do is we can just say, we can come in here and we can say true, not true, sorry, branch. And we want this flow to come through here. So we can say, okay, well, we have our targeted object. We're going to say if the fire is true, then what do we want to do? We want to destroy that object. Now, let's say that we want to destroy that object unless it's unless it is ground, right? So because if we shoot the ground and the ground disappears, right, then we're just going to fall into infinity. And that's, you know, an entertaining thought, but, you know, not very useful for most cases. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to create one more little bit of logic. And so we are going to say, we've got our tag, we're getting our tag here, but we can just come from this Raycast hit out here and we can say game object and compare tag dot compare tag. And the tag we're going to compare it to is ground, which I believe is lowercase in my case. Yeah, make sure you check the case, but I'm going to say ground. So basically we're going to say if this is true, then right, we don't want to do anything. So this is actually going to be a little bit goofy. So right, we're going to say, okay, well, if this is not null, if there's actually an object, then we want to essentially check to see if we're pressing the fire button. If we're pressing the fire button, then we want to check and see if we're targeting the ground. If we're targeting the ground, we don't want to do anything. If we're not targeting the ground, then that means we can destroy the object. So we're going to go from false to this. We're going to just say destroy, and we want the game object destroy. And we don't even need a timer. We're just going to make it instant. And then the object we want to destroy is going to be, we're going to come from this Raycast collider hit one more time. And we could have created a variable to store all of this and make our graph a little neater, but we're moving pretty quick. So we're going to go ahead and click, and we're just going to say collider dot game object get. And then we just connect that right there. Okay. And it looks like everything is ready to go. So let's go ahead and see if we can shoot some objects. Okay, so I'm going to click so that my thing is locked. I'm going to come over here and click, and I've destroyed that object. If I click on the ground, nothing happens. That's exactly what we want to have happen. If I come over here, I can click on this object, right? If I click up in space, right, it doesn't even matter because there's nothing to shoot. Now, ideally, I would probably still want to have, right, if this, just because I'm aimed at the sky doesn't mean I can't shoot. It'd be more, right, useful to, I shot part of the turret away. There's something else still there, but that's fine. Right, but so I'm able to clear the scene, right, escape. So, right, so this is like a really simple way to create some targeting using Bolt and a Raycast, right? So this is one method of, shooting projectile. Now the other thing is, like, say you're shooting something that either has physics applies, like you could say you're shooting something where it actually lobs an object at a target, or you want to be able to have this, physical bullet or rocket or something, fly through the scene and hit your object. And you actually, part of the mechanics are that it will take a certain amount of time, right? The projectile is only going to move so quickly. And so that's part of the challenge is, that anticipation. And so we'll look at that, doing that here in this next tutorial. So stay tuned.